probably get started here. So this will be a brief introduction to the Chameleon testbed and a pretty simple, thorough kind of deep dive. Sorry, give me 1 second. So today we'll be going through kind of just the high level basics of how to get working with the testbed, and then we'll actually kind of go through the steps of walking through the process for discovering resources on the testbed, getting reservations to use the hardware, and then actually launching instances and running things on the testbed. So looks like we got a couple more folks here. So I'll be giving kind of a high-level overview of just what Chameleon is, and then we'll kind of go into the more interactive tutorial. And I will try to share a link with everyone so that you can actually follow along with the tutorial if you would like. And we'll be actually going through something that's in the documentation. So if you want to go back after the tutorial and just work through it, it's a very simple way to get familiar with the basic features that Chameleon offers. So anyways, without much more further ado, we can actually get into the tutorial here. And so if we were to kind of distill the most important things down to know about Chameleon, it would essentially be kind of what we see on this slide. So kind of 4 key points to highlight here about Chameleon is our hardware support, being a testbed, and also being one that prides ourselves on offering a very diverse selection of hardware. Our hardware support is very central to our operation, and Chameleon supports a range of hardware, as we'll kind of see once we start getting into the specifics. Everything from data center hardware even to small edge device hardware. We have 2 main testbed sites, one at the Argonne National Laboratory in Chicago. This is called the UC site, and the other one is at the Texas Advanced Computing Center, TAC for short, and this is in Austin, Texas. Both of these sites contain a huge diversity and scale of hardware. So these centers feature a lot of different data installations. They have many nodes, accelerators, petabytes of storage, and there's a network connection across the sites that supports up to 100 gigabytes of network speed. And as I'll explain a little bit later, we also have some volunteer sites for other institutions that you can also use the hardware that those sites make available through the same Chameleon portal. And then, as I mentioned, we also have Chiat Edge, our edge test bed, which contains a variety of different IoT devices like Raspberry Pis and Jetson Nanos. Our kind of main feature that we offer at Chameleon is bare metal configuration. So all of the Chameleon hardware is available for bare metal configuration. You can, once you reserve a node or a specific piece of hardware, you have full access to the hardware. And this allows users to develop new operating systems, virtualization solutions, and really have the flexibility to tune the nodes that they're using for research without having to deal with additional software layers. And this is something that really distinguishes Chameleon, aside from the fact that Chameleon is free to use, well, at least for research. is also what distinguishes Chameleon from other commercial clouds like AWS and Google Cloud, which is you get this really really great, bare metal like configuration, so you can do a lot more with the hardware. Um, including power the nodes on and off. You can boot from custom kernels. You have root access and serial console access on the nodes. So this really opens up a lot of different avenues for experimentation. I should mention that you may be familiar with some of the infrastructure that Chameleon is built on top of. We have OpenStack infrastructure, which is kind of serving as a base or foundation for the Chameleon testbed. So we like to say that Chameleon is about 50% leveraging and influencing the OpenStack community and tool stack, and then 50% kind of special sauce, which is we've really taken the OpenStack infrastructure and we've customized it to provide greater degrees of freedom to the users and deeper reconfigurability. We've integrated more advanced features like advanced networking and snapshotting. And if you are familiar with OpenStack at all, it's a very complicated, very powerful, but very complicated, low level amount of control. So Chameleon takes a lot of that stuff and tries to abstract some of it away to specifically help our researchers do what they're trying to do. But the great thing about being based on OpenStack is, as we'll see in the tutorial, we actually have a huge amount of existing features from OpenStack that we can utilize in Chameleon. And so if you're trying to do something really complex, OpenStack is it may be useful to kind of explore more what that platform supports. So the last point I'll mention here is that we have a strong effort and put a lot of effort into disruption and digital artifact sharing. Jupyter is an integrated service that we have on the testbed, and this is closely connected to Trovy, which is a kind of our repository for sharing testbed artifacts with other users and with the community, as well as with people that you're working on projects with. And basically trying to figure out the next kind of killer app in digital sharing, specifically to support research and education and computer science and related domains. Quickly, I'll just go through the numbers. We have Chameleon's been in operation for about 10 years now, so there's just a huge amount of impact that we've seen. Where we've gone over about 10,000 users since we've started, have over 1,100 projects, and the users on Chameleon have published over 700 publications referencing Chameleon as enabling the research. And we've also, as you see, have tracked about 19 million service units, which is a measure of resource allocation on the testbed. It's basically represents an amount of computing power and time assigned to users for experiments. And you can see that we've had quite a lot of usage of the testbed since we've started. And there's also just a huge amount of international and interinstitutional communities on the testbed. So it's a really great, I think, community to be a part of. And especially if you're interested in, certain domains, there's a lot of really fascinating work that's already happening on the testbed and folks that you could potentially connect to. Getting a little more specific, so we have two sites, two main sites, UC and TAC. Both of these sites have different hardware, so if you're looking for a specific kind of hardware, you should be, make sure that you're checking what's available at both sites, because there is some difference across what they offer. But both sites have quite a good variety of different types of nodes, CPU compute nodes. We have GPUs, FPGAs, some storage hardware and network hardware, and then again we have the volunteer sites, which also offer their own hardware And all of this, as we'll see, is browsable, and you can see what sites have which hardware. And then we also offer some shared storage for this testbed as well, which I'll go through a little bit today. And as I mentioned before, all of these sites are kind of connected by this very kind of high-speed network. There's also a possibility to do kind of cross-site experiments with network stitching. So if you want to try and do something where you're having two nodes at two different sites involved in an experiment, that's also possible. So the experimental workflow is kind of this just provides an overview, and basically this is what we'll be going through in more depth today, with the exception of monitoring. That's a little bit more of an advanced topic. But we'll kind of mention the most important things here for each of these steps in terms of working with Chameleon infrastructure and using it for your experiments or projects or whatever the case may be. And as I mentioned, we'll be starting kind of from scratch here. So I'll be assuming that this is kind of your first time coming to the test bed, and that you'll be kind of you're kind of coming in fresh. And so we'll go through kind of all these steps, but at the end of this, you should be able to kind of go onto Chameleon, launch your own instance, and at least get to that point in the experimental workflow. And then our tutorial at 3 o'clock today will go into a little bit more of the special tools that we offer to make experiment orchestration and running your experiments easier. So let's go ahead and get into it. As I mentioned, we'll be going through this tutorial. This is something that we do have on the website, on our documentation. Read the docs. I'm actually pretty much just going to be going through this documentation itself, with, of course, adding a lot of context and explaining some more of the steps that are involved here. But if you want to go back and look at this, you're more than welcome to. And we're going to be starting with, as I mentioned, signing up and creating a user account. So this is, of course, going to be the very first thing that you will have to do if you want to use the Chameleon testbed. You will need to have a user account. And we try to make this process super simple. So let me just make sure. Okay, yes, I'm sharing my screen. Everyone can see this, I hope. Please put something in the question and answer if you can't. But so the process for signing up for an account is pretty straightforward, but I just want to show it quickly so that there's no confusion. When you go to the Chameleon portal, which is this chameleoncloud.org domain, and you'll click on login, you'll be directed to this login page, and there's going to be a couple of different options on here. We encourage most users to just use this sign-in via the federated login. This is going to be probably the easiest login experience for most people, and I'll show you just how this works. We use another service provided by this group called Globus, which does authentication services and identity management. And this is super simple because you can then actually just use your own organization login to create an account on Chameleon. And you don't have to deal with, creating a new username and trying to keep track of different passwords and things like that. And so if you see, if I click continue here, then I'm actually just going to be logging into my own institution's page here. And once I log in, well, it's going to make me do this, so I'm going to close this out. But once I've logged in, then I can basically see, I'll be able to just use my own institution login. If you also saw on the last page, there was an option to sign in with Google and GitHub or this other service org ID. So there are a couple different options, but again, I would recommend using the federated login when you're creating your account. Just kind of makes things simpler. So let's go back to the main portal. And so I'm logged in now. I have my account, and I'll just give a quick rundown of kind of the main portal page here. Everything you're going to be accessing pretty much through this menu bar. But these about tab just contains stuff about Chameleon if you're interested in looking at, like, what's the background, or some of the papers and things like that are here. We also have the user tab, which is going to be what we'll be talking about mostly. And then there's documentation and FAQs, webinars linked here. And then this experiment tab is another important one, which we'll be going through in more detail. The blog page also has a lot of interesting content. For instance, we publish user experiments every month, so you can click through the blog here and see what other people have been doing on the Chameleon testbed. And we also provide tips and tricks blogs, which are also more documentation / kind of mini tutorials that help guide people through different aspects of using the testbed. But anyways, once you log in and you have an account on the Chameleon website, you'll be able to go to this user tab and click on dashboard. And this is going to be where you'll see a lot of your, basically kind of the main hub for all your projects and your profile on the Chameleon testbed. And you can see here that there's this little widget that just shows me all of the projects that I have associated with my account. And there's also some other information here about the open tickets, which we'll go through a little bit later. If you need to update your profile at all, you can do that on the profile page here by just going to this edit profile button. This is information that you'll be asked to fill out when you initially register, but if you ever need to go back and change it, then this is where you'll do that. Sorry, let me go back to the dashboard. But the main thing here that we're going to focus on is the projects tab. So Chameleon is, as I said, it is an open public research testbed. However, we do require, of course, that the usage of the testbed falls within certain parameters of what people are allowed to do. And everything that happens on Chameleon is for research. So, we're not supporting commercial applications. People can't necessarily come and run an app or some kind of business off of our servers. So to keep track of all this, what people are working on, and also to help organize your own work on the testbed, we have what we call projects. So Chameleon projects are what you're going to be doing all of your work under, and organizing all of your work under. And the important thing to note here is that in order to do anything, virtually anything on Chameleon, you need to have a project. So you either need to create a new project, or you need to join a new project. I'm assuming most of you are students, which means that you are not eligible to create projects on Chameleon. So if I go back to the profile, you'll see that there's this field here that says PI eligibility, and it says that I am eligible. However, we do kind of keep a close, we have limitations on who can be PI eligible on the platform. It's mostly restricted to folks like faculty members or leaders of research groups at institutions, and not for students. But you can get added to projects pretty easily. So if you're working with someone who has PI eligibility, they can create a project for you, and then you can easily be added to the project. So as I mentioned earlier today, you can follow along with this tutorial. We'll be using this Chameleon tutorial project, which has already been set up for us. And I'm going to just add a link here that you can click on if you want to join the project to follow along. Mark, can you, I think you will get notifications, right, when people join?
Yes, I can monitor.
Okay, great. So this is one way to add users. Oh wait, I don't know. Let me make sure that everyone, was everyone able to see that link that I put in the chat? Yes, hosts and panelists. Okay. Um, but this is one easy way to add multiple users. So you can just click on this link here and add users. Let me also just give a quick rundown of the project page itself. So you'll have the project title. This project code here is actually really important when you're working with the testbed and using certain things. So this actually is useful to have handy when you're doing things. However, we also know that it's kind of a pain to memorize just a random string of numbers. But if you're ever looking for what your project kind of code is, this is what it is, and you can find it on the project page here. And then it will also tell you who the PI of the project is and some additional information about the project. The other important thing that I want to note here is that there's the allocations associated with projects. So when someone creates their first project on the platform, it will automatically give them an allocation. Allocations are basically, you can think of them as computing resource grants that you're given to do stuff on the testbed. So if you reserve a node for a day and you're using that node for some experimentation, that kind of counts as a charge against your allocation. And so we track how much usage is coming out of particular projects. We do limit this to 20,000 SUs, service units. This is quite a lot. So you do have to be going through quite a lot of resources to use this amount. And this is also a 6-month period usually. So you have quite a bit of time to go through these SUs. And then at the end of the project, the manager of the project, either the PI or you can also make members managers of the projects, they can request a new allocation, and that will extend the allocation for another 6 months and give you more resources to continue working with the hardware. But very important, you have to have an allocation in order to do anything on the testbed, really. If you don't have one of these, then if you're part of a project that doesn't have an active allocation, you will have to ask someone, or if you're a PI, you'll have to request an allocation and in order to actually use the testbed. And that process happens pretty quickly. It's usually about a day or so before you can, the turnaround for that is usually about a business day. So, okay, so we've gone over projects. Just all of this is mostly upfront information for you just to know how you can actually access the testbed. But once you get to this point, so you've joined a project, and the project that you've joined has an active allocation that still has available SUs, then you'll be able to start working with the testbed. So we're going to now go into the more exciting part of the tutorial here, and we're going to actually start reserving hardware and launching an instance on it. And then I'll show you how to connect to the instance using SSH, and then actually be able to interact with the instance that you've created. So to do that, we're going to go to the experiment tab here. And under here, there's going to be basically a bunch of different options that we'll be covering in one way or another, either during this tutorial or later in the week in the other tutorials. But the main thing that we'll be using today is going to be these site links here. So right now we're on Chameleon Cloud. This is the portal. This is kind of the main website for Chameleon Testbed. However, if you're actually going to be working with the hardware, you're going to need to go to one of our site portals. And so you'll see here now we're on a different domain, chi at UC. So this is the site that we're on. We're on the UChicago site. As I mentioned, there's multiple sites that you can go to on Chameleon. Chi at UC is one of the primary ones. Chi at TAC is another one. And I can easily switch between different sites through this little drop-down menu here. So if I want to go to Chi at UC, I can see that I'm back here again. And this is going to also show you what project you have active. So as I mentioned, you need to have an active allocation. The project identifier here is going to be that code that I mentioned. Is annoying to remember, but it is actually important. So I'm going to go back to this project that we're using, and I'm going to check which one. Okay, so it's 306. So I'm going to switch over to that project to make sure that we're using that one. So, so now I have the active project. I've set the site that I'm using. So I'm going to use GA at UC. And I now have my project set. So I'm going to be using this allocation that we have here. And I'm going to start by reserving some hardware. So as I mentioned, there is a lot of different hardware on the Chameleon testbed. And the first thing you'll have to do when you're working with the testbed is decide what hardware you want to use. You will have to explicitly reserve that hardware, and only then will you then be able to actually set up instances on the hardware and actually do things with it. So this is an important first step is you need to make what we call a lease or a reservation for the hardware that you're going to be using. And so you may be thinking, well, how do I know what hardware is there? There's one way to do that, which is through this hardware discovery. I'm going to come back to that in a little bit. Another way to see what hardware we have available is through the host calendar. The host calendar is nice because it also shows you whether or not certain nodes are available at the, over time. So if you see a solid block of color here, that means that someone else is using this node. And this line here shows us what the current day is, the current time. So we can see that for this node in particular, there are no current hosts available. So we can't reserve anything for this node right now. So we're going to go and see if there's some other nodes available. So if I go here, I can see that these compute Cascade Lake are. So this is another node type that we have available on the UC site. And I can see that for these nodes, there are quite a few of them that are currently available. And so I should be able to reserve one of these nodes for the tutorial. And again, you can also kind of change the timeline that you're looking at. So if you want to look further out, you can set the end date for the calendar to be further. And then you can see, if you're need to make an advanced reservation, like for the GPUs, for instance, these are only one node and extremely popular. So it's really important to kind of plan ahead of time if you're going to need to use something like this, and make a reservation in advance based on when other people are using it. So that's one way to see what hardware is available. So let's go ahead and create a lease for that node that I saw that was available. And I'm going to create a lease, I'm going to go to the reservations tab here. So, basic steps so far, we've gone to the site. Once we go to the site, we're going to make sure we have our project set, and we're going to make sure that we're on the same, the site we want to use. Then we're going to go to reservations and click on leases, and then create lease. And so create lease is going to be the way that we actually make the reservation for the hardware that we want to use. And this form is pretty straightforward. I'll walk through it right now with you just to show you how it works. but we're going to start with giving the lease a name. So I'm just going to call it my first lease. And then I can pick a start date for it. I want the lease to start right away because we're going to work with it right away. So I actually don't need to put anything in here right now. This will just default to today, and the start time will default to now. However, if I did want to have it start in the future, I can select a date, and I can also give it a specific time that I want the lease to start. The other thing is I'll need to decide how long I want my lease to be. So your lease can be anywhere from like an hour or, around an hour to 7 days. So we don't allow you to make leases beyond 7 days, but you can make a lease up to 7 days. And this is just to make sure that people don't hog the resources too much and we have fair usage of the testbed resources. But again, I'm not going to have to really put anything here because all of this will just default to 1 day. So I'm just going to make a lease that starts right now, and it's going to last 1 day until tomorrow at this exact time. And then once I set those general details, I'm going to be asked if I want to reserve a host with the lease. So the host is the hardware. So this is what I'm going to say. I want to reserve a host, and I can say how many hosts I want to reserve and the number of hosts, what the minimum and maximum is. So if I wanted to have more than one, I could say that I want to have a minimum of 3 and a maximum of 3. I'm just going to use one. We're going to keep things simple. So I'm not going to have multiple. And then down here is where I'm going to specify what hardware I actually want to use. So you might be wondering, like, okay, so far we've kind of described what kind of lease we want, but where are we actually going to put in the details about the hardware that we want to use? And that's going to be here on this resource properties tab. And the primary way to do that is by selecting the node type. And so as we saw in the host calendar, this compute cascade like R node type was available. So I'm going to put that in here. I don't need to specify exactly which node, because what's going to happen is once I create the lease, the system's going to go and look up the hardware I've requested, and it's just going to say, is there at least one that I can give for this lease? And it's going to say yes, and then it's just going to assign me one. So I'm not going to be asking for a very specific node, but I'm just going to be saying I want this particular type. I don't care which one, as long as it's this particular type. If you do care specifically about things like, oh, I need it to have this specific specification, you do have options for using these more granular filters. And there's, as you can see, there's quite a lot of fields that we expose here. There's also UID field. So if you already know exactly what node you want to use, you can look up the identifier for the node, and then you can specify that in the lease here as well. But we don't care about that for now, so we're just going to use the node type, and then I'm going to click next. And finally, I'll be asked to set up a network. So I can reserve a network if I want. I'm not going to do that for this example today. But if you would like to set up a network for your experiments, there is an option to reserve it. And it's just important to make a note that you do have to reserve the network if you're going to do that. If you don't do that, then you won't have it when your lease actually starts. So if you want a network, you'll have to do that, and then you can fill out the information here. The really important thing here is for, basically all leases, you're going to want to reserve a floating IP address. This is what we'll use to actually get access to the node through SSH, so that I can actually access the node and work on it from my own local computer. And so pretty important to remember that if you actually want to SSH into your node, you do need to reserve a floating IP to do that. And we're just going to do one, and then I'm going to click create. And once I click create, the system is going to kind of take all the information I just gave it, and it's going to kind of make sure that everything is correct, and that it can in fact create the lease that I've requested for the time that I've requested it. So after I click create, my lease is going to show up here in this table. and it's going to just show me a little bit of information. For instance, it's going to tell me that right now my lease is pending. So I've just submitted this. The system's still trying to figure out if this lease will in fact work. And assuming that it does, this status will eventually turn to active. And once it's been active, I can actually take it and start using it to create instances on the nodes that I've reserved. So as I mentioned, while we wait for the lease to kind of get active, the host calendar is good for seeing availability for different node types. There's also a network calendar, which is pretty much the same thing. It's instead of showing you the availability for nodes, it shows you the availability for our networks. And then, okay, so we'll go back here. So now we can see that the lease has become active, which means that everything went okay and we got the resources that we requested. So now if I want to see some more detail about this lease that I just created, I can click on the name and I'll be taken to this detail page. I can see there's an ID associated with my lease. This may be useful for when you start working with some of the other kind of like command line tools or programming libraries that we have available on the testbed, which we'll be talking about in the second tutorial. And then I can also see when my lease will start and end and the status as well. The other thing I can see here is the reservations that I've attached to this lease. So I made one reservation for a physical host, and it's specifically this Compute Cascade Lake R. And then I've also made a reservation for a floating IP. And again, I can see that both of these reservations have specific IDs and that they are both active. And then finally, I can actually see the specific node that I got from the system. So this is the unique identifier for this node, and then this is just a shorthand name for the node. And then I also can see that the status is healthy. If I wanted to, I could reallocate this node here. We're not going to do that right now, but so that's the lease. We have our lease now. So now that we've gotten the lease, we can actually go on to running an instance on the node that we've reserved. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to go to this compute tab here on the side. And underneath here, we're going to go to instances. And this instances page is just going to show you an overview of all the instances that you have running underneath this specific project and on this specific site. So remember, everything on here is specific to the site. If I had something running at TAC, it wouldn't show up here because I'm not on that site. So this is showing all the instances that I have for this project for this site. I can create a new instance by clicking on this launch instance button here. And like the lease creation, I'm going to basically be submitting a form and giving details to the system about how I want to configure this instance and then launch it. So the first thing I'm going to do is just create a name for the instance. I'm going to just define this and say it's my first instance. And then I can give a short description of the instance. So I can say showing how to launch instance on Chameleon. And then I'll go to reservation. And so this is the important part here. So I need to specify a reservation that I'm going to be using for the launch. And I have to specify an active lease. So here's the lease that we just made. I can click on this lease to use for my reservation. And then I'm going to only launch one instance. So if I wanted to launch more instances, I could increase that here, but we're just going to do one. Then I'm going to go to the next page. And on here, this is where I'm going to select the source from which I will boot the instance. So I'm going to use an image. And a couple things to note here. I can scroll down, and from the form itself, I can select an image that is already uploaded to the testbed. So there's already a bunch of images available for users to use. You don't need to create a custom image or just or upload your own image to actually use the resources. We already offer some on here. Some of them are supported specifically by Chameleon. So if they have this little logo next to them or this badge, that means that we maintain these and we try to keep them up to date. And if there are problems with them, we fix them and so on and so forth. The rest of these are all user submitted. So if it doesn't have this, it means that probably someone on our community uploaded it. It's probably important to take a closer look at these and make sure, like, have they been used recently? If not, you may not want to use them, or they may require quite a bit of update to actually be useful. But we do offer so we have these images that are pretty much ready to go off the shelf, and I'm going to use that for our instance. So I'm going to use this Ubuntu 22.04 image. In order to allocate it to the instance, I'm just going to click the up button. So now it's allocated here, and I can go to the next step, which is going to be to allocate a network to the instance. So another important step here, you're going to want to select a network that you're going to use for the instance. In this case, I'm going to use the shared net. This is probably the most common one that you're going to use. FabNet is a special network that is used for stitching between sites. So if I have an experiment at TAC and at UC and I want to be able to have those experiments communicate, I can use FabNet. And FabNet runs through the Fabric testbed, which is a separate testbed from Chameleon. But they also do, they have, provide a lot of interesting networking features that can be useful for networking research. So anyways, we're going to use SharedNet, and this is an important step because if you don't assign a network here, you won't have communication with the node. And then I'm going to go to network ports. There's not really anything to do here, but you can assign network ports to the instance. And the final most important step here is to add in a key pair. So if you're using SSH, you're going to need a key pair to be able to actually access the instance. And we're going to do that at this step here before we start the instance. And you can either create a new key pair at this point with this little function here. You can import one. So if you have like a key pair that you just want to upload, you can do that. If you already have key pairs that you've used on the testbed, those will show up down here. And so I'm just going to use one that I've already set up, and I can see the public key here if I click on this. And then after that, I've pretty much done everything we need to do to launch the instance. There are more basic things or advanced things that you can do. So if you wanted to have like a customized script that runs after an instance has launched just automatically, you can upload that here, or you can even just type something in here. And there's some other options related to that. We have server groups and other kind of advanced features. I'm not going to go into these too much because frankly, I don't really know how they work, but maybe we can learn together in a future tutorial. But we've gone over the essential stuff that you need to do to launch the instance. So we have the key pair, we have our network, we have our source, our image, we got the details, we're ready to go, and we're going to click launch. So now this is going to be take a little bit of time, probably anywhere from 6 to 8 minutes to actually build and spawn and launch the instance. This takes a while because, as I said, we're using a bare metal node, and we're building kind of everything from scratch. So everything's kind of getting set up on a clean slate for us before we have access to our instance. So this process takes a little bit of time, and it's also kind of depends on the size of the image. So if you're using a really beefy, bulky image, this could end up taking quite a bit of time, this step. So just something to keep in mind when you're working with the testbed. This is not going to just happen automatically. You're going to have to wait a little bit for this to build and actually start running. But you can see the status here, and it will update once the instance is running, and it will tell us, hey, we're ready to go. In the meantime, while we wait for that to actually start working, let me go back and show you the hardware discovery page. So as I mentioned, we have different ways of looking up hardware. One of those ways is through the host calendar, which again, you can access through the lease page here. The other one is this hardware discovery page, which we also sometimes refer to as the hardware catalog. And this is probably the most comprehensive, integrated source of information we have currently about hardware on Chameleon. As you can see, it tells you at the top how many nodes are available. So there's 554 nodes that we have on the test bed. These are all the general kind of categories or kind of models or that you can categorize the nodes under. And then it tells you on the side here how many nodes are associated with each of these classes of hardware. The other cool thing you can do here is if you want to filter by site, you can do that. So if I want to see what sites, what does TAC have available, I can click on the site here and it will gray out the ones that are not available at TAC and show me the ones that are. And again, this is going to automatically update to the number of nodes specifically that are available at the TAC site. And you can also see the total down here. So there's about 329 nodes available from TAC. We can do the same thing for the UChicago site. Again, UChicago not as big as TAC, so it doesn't have as many nodes, but still quite a lot of variety of nodes available at this site. And then we can also see, for instance, what nodes are available at other sites as well. The other cool thing to do here is if you have more specific needs for your test, for your experiments in terms of hardware specs, you can filter by that on here. So if you're looking for like something that has, I don't know, tons of RAM, then this is going to be your option. We can also, see more details. So if I want to see like how many of nodes have at least 80 threads, then it looks like it's going to be a GPU. And then I can click on this GPU class here and I can say view. And when I click on view, I'm going to be shown another page with a lot more information about all the nodes that are available according to the filters that I've specified. And this is going to have information on processor, where you can even see information in some cases about where it's placed in the rack, and then additional information that is hopefully helpful for deciding what hardware you want to use. This is also will tell you where the specific node is. So this one is at the UChicago site, and again, just a really useful way to get a good overview of the different things that we offer. And then the other thing I'll show you while we still wait for the instance to launch, which, still spawning, is the appliance catalog. So this is going to be kind of similar to the hardware catalog, except this is going to be specifically for appliances or images that you can run on the Chameleon hardware. As I said, this is basically what we saw at the beginning when we were looking at the list of images that we were using to boot our instance, except this is going to have a little bit more information and context. So this is a good thing to look at as well as the hardware discovery before you go to make a lease, because you'll be able to kind of decide, okay, I'm going to use this image and I'm going to use this specific hardware, which may not be easy to do once you're filling out the lease form. So here I can click on this little filter and see all the Chameleon supported images. As I said, again, we have quite a few on here that we maintain. And then all the ones that don't have this little Chameleon badge are from users. The other cool thing here is that I can click on this table button and I can see who supports the image. So if I want to use this image, but let's say it's been hasn't been updated since 2020, so maybe I want to reach out to the support and ask them like if they have a more updated image, or whatever the case may be. But you can do that. You can also, as I just showed, you can click on an appliance and actually see more information here about the appliance, including who uploaded it and who is supporting it. If it's a template, for instance, this is a template, then you can also download the template, and there's other documentation and things that you can link to. Again, all of this is user supported as well, so you yourself can upload stuff here and share it with the community. And we have, around 57 appliances uploaded here, so pretty good source of, pretty good repository of stuff. All right, so we're still spawning here. While we wait for that, I can go ahead and pause and just kind of see if anyone has any questions before we kind of go into the final stretch of the tutorial and just open it up a little bit for questions. So, but is there any questions right now? Feel free to unmute yourself and just ask them out loud or put them in the chat. If there's no questions, I'll just kind of show while we're still waiting. Oh, now this is active. Okay. So perfect timing. So now our instance has launched, and we can see here the status says active. So everything's good. It's running. If I click on the page, I'm going to see that, again, a lot more detail about the instance. My instance is going to have an ID. It's going to have a name. These are useful references that I can use to refer to my instance. And I'm going to be able to see when it was created, how long it's been running, other information kind of related to the instance here. I'll be able to see the IP addresses. So this is the interface that we've assigned to the instance when we launched it. If you remember, I mentioned that we needed to attach a network. And then I'll also be able to see some information, for instance, about what key pair I'm using on the instance and whether or not I have any volumes attached, which is related to the storage, which I'll try and touch on if we have time. But anyways, so that's kind of the quick overview of the instance page. Before we can actually access this instance, which is what we're going to try and do next, I have to associate the floating IP address that I reserved when we first started. So as you can see, we have the network tab here, and I'm going to go to the floating IP tab, and I'm going to associate it to the instance that I just got running. So I'm going to click on associate here, and then on this form, I'm just going to select my instance. So it should show up here with the name. It should be pretty easy to find. And then I just click associate. And then I see I have a success. And if I go back to my instance now, I should be able to see, yep, that now I have the IP address, my floating IP address associated with the instance. And I should be able to use this to actually get access to my instance. So without further ado, let's go ahead and try and do that. So now I'm going to open up a terminal here. I'm going to make this bigger so that people can see it. And as I mentioned, I have the key that I need to use to access my instance. So if I look at my SSH file, I have my Chameleon key here. This is the one that I'm using. And this is what I'm going to use to get access to the node. So we've kind of gone through all the checklists. We have our IP address here. We have the instance running. Everything is looking good. We're active, and we've assigned the key pair, so we're all good, and we're going to be able to actually access this now. And so I'm going to just do the SSH command, and I'm going to specify which identity file I want to use. And then I'm going to connect to CC at, and then I'm going to type in this IP address, which is the floating point one that I just associated to the instance. And it's going to ask me if I want to accept the fingerprint. I can say yes. This is because I'm connecting for the first time. And then once I hit enter, it looks like I was able to successfully access the instance. So I am now actually connected. I'm tunneled into the instance. I'm running. I'm able to run commands on the instance as if I were on my own local computer. Couple of quick things to go through here is one, you'll see a README on the instance. This is going to give you a little bit of information about how to use some of the different storage options that we provide for Chameleon. There is if you go to the dashboard on the Chameleon site, you can go to object storage, click on container, and this is where you can actually add an object store container. So for instance, if I say I want to add a container named test, and I just say default placement, submit. And then I can see the container here. And I don't know if this works exactly like I'm expecting to. And this is actually going to be put in the mounting point. So here I can see I just created this container called test, and now it's already available in this mounting point here. And so this README kind of provides a little bit of information about how to use that. We also provide a shared file system as well. And this is also something that you can add and mount into your instance. There's a lot of documentation about how to do this on our read the docs as well. So just a little bit of information about how the storage works on Chameleon. And then finally, I'll just mention too that we do have OpenRC file here, which this is related to the OpenStack infrastructure that I mentioned that is a critical component of Chameleon. And this is what you can actually use to get access to the OpenStack CLI and use it to work with your project and with your resources. So last thing I'll mention here is you have root access. So if I can do sudo commands, and as you can see, I am able to have root access to the node. So again, that's that bare metal component of really deep configurability, being able to kind of really take the instances you launch on hardware on Chameleon and do whatever you want with them. So yeah, obviously this is a very, very, very kind of light intro to Chameleon. There's clearly so much more that we could be talking about right now and doing, but this is kind of the most basic. This is how you get hardware, how you reserve it, how you sign in and actually connect to it, and then be able to run things on it. So this is kind of what we just did today, is go through all of the GUI, the graphical interface to do this stuff. At the tutorial that's at 3 o'clock, which you're welcome to join if you have the time, we'll actually be showing how to use other tools to do a lot of what we just did, but programmatically, so that you don't have to go through the web interface every time you want to do something like this. And we'll also be talking about a little bit more of some of the advanced features that the testbed offers. But hopefully this just gives you a good idea of how you can get access to Chameleon, how you can set up hardware and start using it. And all of this, again, is covered in the getting started So if you didn't have a chance to kind of follow along today, you can also go back and go through this process yourself. If you want to join the project, make sure that you do so that you can use the resources if you're going to work through that tutorial. Again, I'll post the join link in the chat so that if you didn't see it before, you can still use it now. And we'll make sure that we, get people added. So with that, I'll just mention that we do have resources for getting help. So there's the documentation, which I've been showing a little bit throughout the project. And then there's our FAQ page and our policies. We have the blog, which I mentioned earlier is useful for also reading more in depth about some of the features on the testbed. And we finally also have a help desk. So if you're on the main Chameleon website and you click on the help desk, you have to be logged in to use this, but once you're logged in, you can create tickets, and these will be answered by our staff who will basically be working on tickets as they come in, Mondays through Fridays, 9 a.m. to roughly 5 p.m. So if you get stuck with something on the testbed and you need some help, this is a great way to get some help, and as well as using the resources that we have available elsewhere.